the screen that we are going to be speaking to you as a team this evening, and I'll start in the top left, and then my colleagues will introduce themselves. So I am Rhonda Nixon, Superintendent.
Bill Hamblett, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary.
Grant Riley, Assistant Superintendent of Early Learning and Elementary Education.
Trina Cassidy, Secretary Treasurer.
Bessie Mochikas, Assistant Superintendent, Inclusive Education.
Art McDonald, Director of Facilities.
Sherry Christensen, Director of Transportation.
Thank you to our team. And you will see there's other individuals on the screen who have been able to say, we can say that they have been able to contribute to this presentation and help us to prepare this evening. Tonight, we're going to review the issue under consideration. We're going to listen and respond to questions after public presentations. However, this evening, we do not have a submitted public presentation. Therefore, what we are going to do is we are going to share the updated feedback since the last time you were with us in round one. And there is considerable feedback, which is the equivalent of watching a public presentation because this came from our community. We're happy to respond to questions and feedback, or if we cannot respond this evening, then we will happily review that on the FAQ webpage. To review the motions and feedback gathered since round one is also part of tonight's presentation. In round one on May 4th, we provided the Brocklehurst community, of which you are a part, with information and an opportunity through a moderator to share your comments or questions. And we also answered all questions on our website. We are now in round two, community engagement. So tonight, as you take part in this session, please submit questions through the Q&A tab. As time permits, as discussed, we will answer any questions or provide clarifications on points that you have, or just read your insights and share them with the community. Any questions not answered, you would find at our website at this particular address. And I'm actually going to walk you through what it looks like. So if you go to our public website, www.sd73.bc.ca, you'll see a very clear square that you can, or rectangle that you can click on, grading catchment changes. When you click on it, it'll take you to a page that says how to get involved. And right where you see kind of the FAQ, you would click there where it says here. And it takes you to a page that will allow you to submit questions, watch previous recordings, including this one, and look at the future sessions that we're offering. What if I still want to present is a question you may have. You may offer to present for 5 minutes a public presentation at any one of the upcoming round two sessions, but you do need to submit that presentation ahead to Dana Heyman at dheyman@sd73.bc.ca. And if you've missed that, it's also on our website on the 2 pages I just described. Our community engagement plan is very clear. We started with round one consultations with separate communities, and we sent you a personal invitation because we wanted you to come and listen and learn about what the issue is and what the feedback was that we had gathered. We also wanted to leave time for clarifying questions, offer feedback, and we also did check our email if you had submitted feedback, and we provided answers on our webpage to the growing FAQs. And then we asked you to mark your calendar for round two. And so now we are going to be in round two on May 16th, but let's say you really wish you had submitted a presentation. You may still do that by submitting it to Dana Heyman as described earlier, and you may look at any one of the dates coming up, May 23rd, June 1st, June 7th, and you could present there. Now that's only if we don't have a full slate of presentations already, but we'll always try to make room for you and be accommodating. As discussed before, we are aiming to bring feedback to the Board of Education on May 29th, and that would be in camera, so you're not going to see anything public. And it's to prepare the board with the best information we have so that by June 19th, they can make a final motion on recommendations. We have a Board of Education comprised of 9 elected school trustees who are charged with the responsibility to decide whether and how we're going to make catchment changes and grade reconfigurations, and to support us in community engagement. Now, community engagement is a superintendent responsibility. And in any time that I'm communicating with you, I'll always clarify the issue, even if it's a bit of a repeat. I think it's important that we're really clear what the issue is that we are considering, the objectives and criteria, the options being considered, and then your options for getting your questions answered, or to just give us your insights. The background has been provided to you in the past, and for those of you who are new, this is not a new issue. Since June 14, 2021, the expected enrollment at Brocklehurst Middle School was to reach 936 students by 2028. So you know that we engaged in further in-depth study this past year into whether Brocklehurst Middle School was indeed too large. We, in fact, have had 28 focus group type consultations in the communities of Brock and the North Shore, and we've conducted research into the size of middle schools provincially. We do know that Brock is the 9th largest middle school in the province of BC, and in working with the staff, administration, and parents over the last few months, they have shared their experiences, and it is very clear that Brock is too large. When we look at middle schools over a period of time, we see that the middle schools are typically around 550 to 600 students, but the middle schools keep that size, but you can see that Brock isn't. And so this issue has continued to exacerbate and not change. So due to the concerns regarding the size of Brocklehurst Middle School, we examined whether we need to complete catchment changes and grade reconfigurations on the North Shore and Brocklehurst, which would coincide with the opening of the new Parkrest Elementary School in the spring of 2024. The motions that you know are under consideration are these. So motion 1, to consult the North Shore and Brocklehurst staff and parent communities about the reconfiguration of the current grades for the following schools. That Brocklehurst Middle School, currently a grade 7 to 9, becomes a grade 8 to 12 in September 2024. That Norcam Senior Secondary, currently grade 10 to 12, becomes a grade 8 to 12 in September 2024. That A.E. Perry, Arthur Hatton, Burt Edwards, K. Bingham, Parkrest Elementary, and Rayleigh become K-7 schools in September 2024. Motion 2 is to consult the North Shore and Brocklehurst staff and parent communities about the proposal to reopen George Hilliard as a K-7 school in 2024. Motion 3 is to consult the same communities about the proposal to engage in a catchment change for the following schools: Brocklehurst Middle School, Norcam Senior Secondary School, excuse me, A.E. Perry, Arthur Hatton, Burt Edwards, K. Bingham, Parkrest, and Rayleigh. Motion 4 is we know that Parkrest is opening, that we're expected to be completed by December 2023. Therefore, there is a motion to consult the North Shore and Brocklehurst staff and parent communities about the proposal to reopen Parkrest Elementary as a K-7 in the spring of 2024 at 2170 Parkrest Avenue. And just for clarity, Parkrest Elementary School is currently housed in George Hilliard.
Trek is currently located in the Happy Vale location, and Trek staff feedback, the Trek staff shared concerns around space and programming pressures, and they did have the expectation that they would be returning to George Hilliard. At this time, Bridges staff are prepared to move to Brocklehurst Secondary School by 2024, and other programs are still examining changes to their current facility, working closely with their principal and still considering all their options. The Aboriginal Education Council has representatives from the 7 local First Nations as well as Métis population. In bringing this to the Aboriginal Education Council, they made some points around the first thing being the location. The Aboriginal Education Council appreciates that smaller locations for all students of all ages are thought to be better. And so they like the current location at Trek. In terms of programming, in particular, the 4 Directions program, the Indigenous program, has a focus on outdoor hands-on electives and activities, which the Aboriginal Education Council appreciates as it's well aligned to the First Peoples principles of learning and Aboriginal ways of knowing and doing. They also commented on the benefits of specialty programs such as academies at Brock and hoped that the district would look at expanding those types of opportunities. Finally, they did have some conversation around transportation. They appreciated that the district is reviewing transportation and ways that we can help students get to Trek feeling safe. In addition, they wanted to make sure we continually reviewed schedules to make sure students living throughout the city would make any connections to help them get to Trek with the least amount of travel time. So motion 5 was to consult the North Shore and Brocklehurst staff and parent communities about the proposal to move bridges to Brocklehurst Secondary, grade 8 to 12, and to keep alternative education in 4 directions at Happy Vale by September 2024.
So as we've been working through this, we've provided 2 options for consideration for the board, and they're both contingent on George Hilliard. The first option is if George Hilliard opens as a K-7 school. The second option is if George Hilliard does not open as a K-7 school and all the Trek programs move back. What we have provided here is a summary of both options just in terms of capacity utilization, and capacity utilization is the enrollment of the school divided by the capacity. Higher numbers mean more full, lower numbers mean less full. On the left is what would happen if George Hilliard becomes a K-7 school in 2024. On the right is what happens if George Hilliard does not become a K-7 school in 2024. And for the purpose of tonight, I'll highlight 2 for comparison. K Bingham, if George Hilliard becomes K-7, would be at 66%. If George Hilliard does not open as K-7, it would be at 99% with at least a portable. A.E. Perry would be at 95% if George Hilliard opens, and it would be at 117% with 2 portables if it doesn't.
Sun Peaks was presented last time, and we're not going to spend too much time here, but just for those of you who aren't familiar, Sun Peaks is a school that began in 2012 to 2013 as a K-5. And at that time, you'll see that because it didn't have grade 6, their grade 6s went to Rayleigh, and of course, their designated catchment school for 7, 8, and 9 was Brocklehurst Middle School. Their designated catchment school for grade 10 to 12 was Norcam Senior Secondary. And it was really lovely. It continued to grow 2013 to 14, all the way to 2017, 18 into a K-7. And as it did, still, the Brocklehurst Middle School was still as a designated catchment school for grade 7, 8, and 9, and the designated catchment school for grade 10 to 12 remained Norcam Senior Secondary. But as you notice, in 2020-21, the K-9 grades, it was just, it was amazing to have that happen, because now we have Sun Peaks as a K-9 school, and really it's its own designated school. It no longer needed to send students anywhere. The designated catchment school for grade 8 and 9 remained Sun Peaks K-9. And the only time students left was really to go to the designated catchment school for grade 10 to 12, which is Norcam Senior Secondary. If you just take your eyes and go down to the bottom where it goes blue, in the fall of 2024, nothing really changes for Sun Peaks. It's just important for us to really clarify that in the corporate memory, we do want to make that statement that we're consulting the Sun Peaks community about the recommendation to have the board approve that grades 10, 11, and 12 Sun Peaks students continue to have Norcam Secondary, which will be grade 8 to 12 at that time, as their designated catchment area high school in the fall of 2024. Similarly, to consult the Sun Peaks community about the recommendation to have the board approve Sun Peaks School, K-9, to continue as the designated catchment area school for K-9 Sun Peaks students in the fall of 2024. Sun Peaks students in grades 8 and 9 who prefer to attend Brocklehurst or Norcam secondary schools would adhere to the transfer process as outlined in AP 305. So overall, elementary and secondary staffs and PACs supported recommendations 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 as of May 1st. And I say May 1st because if you recall back, When you joined us on May 4th, we really took a lot of time to explain all the feedback, and you see we've abbreviated it this evening, but that's because there was not a lot of confusion about it and we got a lot of consistent feedback. As of May 15th, however, feedback has caused a change in support for motion 6. And the other thing to just keep the group's attention to is that TREC staff were not all present for reviews of information on April 13th. And we can tell you with certainty, there's still some trepidation about remaining in Happy Vale, which is recommendation 2, although there is support. Overall, elementary and secondary staffs and PACs supported recommendations 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the feedback that caused the change for motion 6 was related to this little area you see in blue. When the catchment change occurs in the fall, the students who are attending Parkrest Elementary School, who are designated to go to K Bingham in the fall of 2024, would actually be moving into Parkrest, the new school, or the reopened school in spring, which means then they would have to move again at the end of the year to go to K Bingham. And that motion 6 was to actually propose to provide the choice to Parkrest Elementary students and their siblings who prior to September 2024 live in the proposed new K Bingham Elementary catchment areas presented to attend Parkrest Elementary School until the end of their elementary program in grade 7. So just to reiterate, that motion really had them stay put, not move a second time. And that's the motion that's caused a little more feedback. And we would like to share that with you this evening.
So one of the comments we received, we'll present on the next few slides, was just concern about what happens if the 50 students stay at Parkrest. And it's presented here. We just copied and pasted from the email. So the suggestion was to use older catchment boundaries and make the K Bingham catchment quite a bit bigger than we have proposed in this. And they have also indicated that the only grandfathering that should take place would be grade 12s at NORCAM. So this map might be a little bit hard to read, but it's basically what we were presented with. And the pink areas are the expanded areas of the proposed K Bingham catchment area, which would take a fair bit out of Parkrest Elementary and George Hilliard if it reopens. Now, in terms of how we've calculated the numbers presented, which are capacity utilization numbers, assume all the students are attending their new catchment area school, and as such would assume that board motion number 6 is not approved. However, we have allowed for the 2024 grade 7s to stay at their current school, as we would typically do this for any catchment change. So with this proposed idea, 115 students would move to K Bingham from Parkrest and 55 students would move to K Bingham from George Hilliard. And here we've presented the capacity utilization numbers. K Bingham would be over capacity at 116%, Parkrest would be at 53%, and George Hilliard would be at 54%. So obviously the implications are K Bingham would be too big and would require portables, where Parkrest and George Hilliard would be quite small.
Some of the other feedback that we have heard from consultation is around the concern that if K Bingham opens up smaller than, well, about 170 students, how would that impact some of the programming at K Bingham? So one of the first questions we received was, could K Bingham combine with Parkrest for sports teams and other things that require a larger student population? As you can see on the right, the response is really around, in SD 73, we don't have schools combine to field one sports team at the elementary level. We do have an elementary sports council that governs the elementary sports programming in our district. And the elementary sports council tiers teams depending on how many students are enrolled. And so there are a number of teams within SD 73 that have a lower enrollment. The example there is 220 students or under. And those schools have strong participation in sports teams. Some of the examples given are Rayleigh, Marion Shillingbury, and Ralph Bell. So K Bingham would fit in nicely with that group. Another question was around, is there the possibility that students from Cape Bingham could walk over and take advantage of band programs and special events? And it's important to note that currently there is no band program at Parkhurst Elementary. But in terms of sharing special events, that is something that schools do occasionally partner together. And that would be something that definitely the principals of those two schools, Cape Bingham and Parkhurst, could consider moving forward.
So in regards to Parkhurst students moving twice, one of the comments that was made, if you look at the point under points considered, one person mentioned the first move would be back to Parkhurst with their classmates and teachers. So not a full move. It's just switching physical locations, ? And then the person said, like it was discussed that all changes are difficult. I really only see this as one move and disappointment about leaving a brand new school. And we simply acknowledge this perspective, that thank you for sharing your perspective, that the 50 students who are moving into a new location with their friends and staff from their community are changing physical locations in March until June. And then in the fall, 50 students from this community would then go to Cape Bingham, which can be understood as one change. And I'm only sharing this with this community this evening because it started to become a point of view that people were sharing, and they were starting to look for ways that could this be workable? So it was something that we felt we needed to bring back to this community. So the advisory committee, as you recall from last day, is our representatives from all of the different Brocklehurst and North Shore staff, parents, and they get together and they look at the feedback. And the question around the 50 students moving twice became a focus on Friday, May 12th. When we discussed it, we looked at all aspects of this, like what would happen if Cape Bingham was at 172 students. Now you have to remember we have principals at this table, we have principals from multiple schools, the staff, parent representatives, and senior staff here. And all the way around the table, one of the issues that was raised that really I think is important for this community here tonight is Cape Bingham at 66%. And that means that if they had kept the 50 students, would still be losing 4 teachers. But if they go down to 50% or 172, they would be losing 6 to 7 teachers. So Cape Bingham staff are very committed to their students, and they've been together for several years, and keeping staff would sustain a positive culture. The drop to 50% or 172 students is going to alter the community significantly. And it was the feeling at that time of the advisory committee, which was just this past Friday, May 12th, that we may see more families wanting to transfer. Because as anyone knows online, how you feel when you go into your school depends on the people in it. And when you're with a very committed staff and families are very committed and you get to know one another, you can appreciate that would be hard. There was another discussion around supports. If the school decreased by the 50 students, there could potentially be a reduction in LART time, so learning assistance, resource teacher time, library time, and possibly being eligible for a vice principal. Now, we did have district staff at the table say they would keep Aboriginal education teacher time, Aboriginal education worker time, access to psychologists, SLPs, so speech and language pathologists, resource teachers for deaf and hard of hearing. And also at the table, although it's not written here, there was a discussion by Assistant Superintendent Machikas, who is very indebted to ensuring schools have the proper supports, that would be very fair in looking at LART time as well. Do what we could to keep it whole. Parkhurst staff, the principal has not yet spoken to all staff, but those whom she had spoken to indicated a concern about the drop to 50% for Cape Bingham. Parkhurst staff were also concerned about moving twice. I mean, they'd be moving in April and then again in June, and maybe they could consider a move earlier, and there was discussion around that topic. There was also a concern expressed if Parkhurst was to start with the 50 students, they'd be at 77% capacity rather than 67% capacity. And that was just a comment made. Cape Bingham staff, the principal stated that the feedback from the staff is that they would rather have a portable than lose staff and students, and probably, as we've already articulated, for the reason in point number 1.
Transportation and safety of students was a theme that emerged during the round 1 meetings. Parents expressed concern over the safety at bus exchanges, both at the Lansdowne and the North Shore. They also stated concern for students walking to Brocklehurst Middle School from the Arthur Hatton area. Some questions that arose. What are the options you can think of, and how does this concern fit with the Trek parents and their request? The answer is that currently we transport North Shore elementary students from Burt Edwards, Arthur Hatton, John Todd, and Norcam areas to Brocklehurst Middle School, as this is their designated middle school. For students currently attending Norcam, there is a bus route that picks them up from Brock Park and Brocklehurst Middle School and takes them to Norcam Senior Secondary, as this is their designated school. These bus routes were created 12 years ago due to the changes to school configuration at that time. For the 2024-2025 school year, we would not anticipate continuing these routes for students living in the Arthur Hatton area who attend Norcam Secondary, as this would be their catchment secondary school. Along the same theme of transportation and safety expressed by parents is that at times students attending Trek have difficulty catching a bus because they are too full or the bus driver would not stop. There was also more concern expressed about the safety of the bus exchanges. The question that arose is whether the district could provide a bus. There is potential to provide a bus, however, Trek students live in many different areas within the city of Kamloops. We would need to review where the students live and possibly consider a South Shore and North Shore pickup and drop-off location. The implication is that the district does not typically provide transportation for alternative programs or academies.
Today I had a meeting with the City of Kamloops and BC Transit on the topic of transportation. Based on the information that has been shared on the pending catchment change or catchment area changes and the proposed configuration of Norcam and Brocklehurst, we may have 2 buses available to address the needs of Trek students. We typically have not seen capacity issues on the North Shore buses, but have been made aware of some issues on the South Shore buses. And because Trek students live throughout Kamloops, catching a city bus to Trek can be difficult. As mentioned previously, we could look at a couple of pickup and drop-off areas as a Trek special route. Within Board Policy 17 and Administrative Procedure 560 regarding student transportation, there are provisions that make exceptions for students with particular needs. There was a debate at the Advisory Committee on whether the transportation policy or AP contemplate what safety means. As we move forward in reviewing what may be possible, we are concerned with an influx of safety concerns and a concern about equity and what that means in terms of busing. 2 comments noted on the slides, as you can see, is the need to look at equity and the social pressures being felt by our community. Discontinuing an existing bus route due to changes contemplated this evening may be viewed as a hardship. One committee member mentioned that as an adult, no one bothers them in the area viewed as unsafe, whereas at times students have been approached. Another comment was if we compare attendance on the South Shore and the North Shore, it is likely reflective of the struggle some students face getting to and from school safely. Another comment from the committee was that if getting to school is a barrier, we need to consider how we, the district, can play a role in creating equity. We currently bus approximately 150 to 175 students living on the North Shore to Brocklehurst Middle School. I've received several inquiries to provide busing on the other side of Tronkill Road, so the Norcam side of Tronkill Road, for students who attend Arthur Hatton, but the district simply does not have enough buses to accomplish this. Another comment was that there are adolescent students who are struggling to get to school due to safety concerns. In our rural communities, we also receive requests for busing due to bear and cougar sightings. This safety concern is fair, but the intended consequence is that we are not able to provide busing to each area of concern, and it is very complex to be inconsistent. Our action items for the Transportation Department for the 2023-2024 school year are to review and optimize potential bus routes based on the current transportation policy and administrative procedure, and continue and consider how we might define equity and safety within a policy and AP and what may be possible going forward. We are grateful for the feedback that we've received from these meetings and appreciate we have time to work through these issues.
Sorry for the delay. We also had a comment made by a Rayleigh parent saying it's very sad that Rayleigh students will lose an option of music and sports academies and can only go to them by requesting a transfer. And she, you know, this particular parent had spoken actually to us earlier in that session and said, I'm struggling to understand why NORCAM was determined as the designated school. And, you know, there were a number of comments like this, so I hope we do it justice by explaining. If you look to the right, the response in our discussion is this. Making Brocklehurst Secondary School, a grade 8 to 12, the designated catchment school for Rayleigh results in Brocklehurst becoming very full, 95% plus capacity utilization, and NORCAM would drop to about 60%. So that would make the two secondary schools very imbalanced. And you know that the issue we're addressing is that Brocklehurst is becoming very full, and we're trying to actually create equalization. And also, if you recall, a sustainable solution so that we're not causing change in the area unnecessarily in the future.
One of the themes that we heard from round one was I wonder about the ability to extend academies. We heard this from AEC, TREC, Brock, and NORCAM parents and staff. Our response at this time is it would require us to plan now after the board decision to start a second academy and to determine what extent we could do that too. Furthermore, there was other questions around possible extension of academies. One of the things that we would need to determine is differentiate between what parents are saying at meetings. There is a difference between elite academies, like say an elite hockey academy that might exist down in the Lower Mainland, as opposed to say students who just like to play and love to play at a lower level. There's also the benefit of extending academies at Brock. And one of the questions that came up, can we have more options for the same academies at, say, a school like NORCAM? The feedback from AEC was that there is community growth and team growth helps with self-esteem and a sense of belonging. But because the program is only offered at Brock, it would be more accessible outside of Brock in terms of our students. Every student would have access to the program. The principal indicated, well, right now, it can't necessarily be a program of choice because the school is too full and we can't necessarily always allow students from out of catchment to come. If we have a room, it could be opened up to applications from students outside of Brock's catchment area, and even the soccer academies could come back. The response from AEC is there are just so many students interested in extracurricular, so we want to be able to offer this opportunity to more places than just Brock community. And in terms of the principals trying to wrap their head around it, was we have teachers that drive these programs, so we would need to have the staff to offer them. It would be no different if it was, say, IB teachers with an IB program or academy, swim academy or something like that. The staff is very important. And one of the things that came up, of course, as we talk about reconfiguration is what's going to happen to the staff. So the concern expressed is there are some teachers at Brock who just do grade 7. And they're deciding now whether to put in for a transfer, even though they realize that there's no board motion. It won't be for a decision just yet. And there is some angst in the building because teachers are wanting to know when to apply out. They're worried about their jobs. The action to be taken was through our Associate Superintendent Weidrich, who's in charge of our HR department, will support these staffing questions and discussions now by organizing meetings at Brocklehurst Middle School and NORCAM Senior Secondary once the board's made its decision.
So in summary, motions 1, 2, 3, and 4, there is support for a grade reconfiguration and for catchment changes. The questions are about logistics, clarifying catchments, busing, and asking about designated secondary schools. And we are providing answers, and the questions and many of these points will be worked through in 2023 to 2024. Motion 5 regarding bridges moving. The answer right now is it's possible that it's not yet. It needs to be based on class size and composition guidelines, and until the catchment change and grade reconfiguration is complete, there is limited room in Brocklehurst Middle School for 2023. Hence, that's the issue we're addressing, and we don't know whether or not there will be space to have this change happen at that time. And motion 6 regarding the 50 students. We will continue to provide updated information and consultations about this motion and the problems with letting the 50 students stay. And to be quite honest, this is very difficult for the board. This is not easy. I mean, nobody wants to inconvenience families or disturb students. That's never the goal. But at the same time, we don't want school to get too small and make it unworkable. So, you know, we're working through this, and that's why we felt it was important to bring you this additional feedback this evening. Motions 7 and 8. The Sun Peaks community meets on May 31st. They are the last of round 1, and so I don't want to speak for them, and nor does our team. So we will be in a better position to further give you more information on what they decide in that meeting. But as I said to you, just with that brief glimpse of the history, this is not a change for them, but just making sure they have their feedback before we speak about it. So you might say, well, you know what? How can I continue to join? I want to be able to come to more sessions. Well, you were, if you are in any of the families coming this evening, if you go back in your email, you did receive one on May 2nd, but let's say you're not so sure where that email is, not a problem. You could ask your school principal. We sent them a copy of what we had sent out to you, so they have it. But also our website, like, it's really very clear. And I know when people say that, sometimes you think, oh, I don't want to be clicking around looking. We think it's a pretty easy click away to find the information. And if you can't find it, we have an amazing person, Dana Heyman, and she is always there to help you by email, and she's so patient and kind. So dheyman@sd73.bc.ca. And as well, if you want to present and you thought, well, I missed it, I didn't get my opportunity, you could still send it to her and she'll let you know one of the dates when it might work best for both our team and for your schedule. So on this note, we will stop and give people a moment. We do have some questions coming in and some statements, so I'll just give people a moment to continue writing. But I'll read the first one. It is about safety. So our concern is safety for our kids. It is not safe to walk in this neighborhood anymore on the North Shore. This is why a bus has been asked for. So I will begin the answer to that and say we've heard you very clearly. This was a discussion that was lengthy with our advisory committee. We took you seriously. We're trying to, at this time, review the potential for how we can adjust bus routes to address the questions about the areas that have been named for us. But I will say this, we can't necessarily start writing bus routes before we have motions on catchment changes and grade reconfigurations. And really at this time, I don't think we have any specifics other than we've heard you. And we will try to work with the information we have. But I'm going to give the transportation director, Chris Johnson, a moment if she has anything to add.
One question that I have in response to your question is if you could go onto the website and maybe put a little more information, like where are your concerns? What specific areas are you concerned about? So we can look at them on their own. I would appreciate that.
Thank you, Director Chris Johnson. And that's exactly what I should have said. And I think that's exactly right. We are interested in where the exact streets are and areas are. And of course, we will gather more of that information as we move forward, but that would be very helpful. The second comment, kindergarten students registered in Parkrest next year Has it been thought to register to K Bingham so they don't have to move in grade 1? And we have discussed this. I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Riley, though, to give a response.
Thanks so much, Superintendent Nixon. So as Superintendent Nixon says, this has been a discussion item at the Advisory Council. And I think there is the potential for having students that are going into kindergarten and currently registered at Parkcrest that would be moving to K Bingham in grade 1 to start in K Bingham. One of the things, of course, though, is we have to wait for the board to actually make the decision. And that would be June 19th is what our best guess is. And so waiting for that decision to happen, then we could move forward and provide that option to families.
We're very patient, so please go ahead and finish your questions. We have a couple more coming our way. Oh, we have another question. It's busing. Are bus routes going to be copied from what it was 12 years ago when Brock was secondary? And we will have Director Chris Jensen answer.
So 12 years ago, service to Brock Middle School would have been from, or sorry, when it was a secondary school, there was very little busing to Brock. It was a community school. We bused a lot of students to Norcam from Sun Peaks area and Pinnetan Paul Lake, but we don't go to rural on the west end of Brock Middle School. So most of the students walked to Brock Middle School 12 years ago.
So I'm going to read this out loud. The kids that are in Brock Middle School now should be able to stay until grade 12 if they live in Heffley Creek, because they have friends that will, yes, because they will have friends that will not be able to go to Norcam with them because they live in Brock. And I did email, but I didn't get anything back. If you emailed and didn't get, I just want to answer that last part. If you emailed and didn't get anything back, it's probably because you submitted it through the website and we put it on FAQs. But we don't typically respond back by email, but maybe we need to make that more clear. So you've helped us understand that. I will answer the question that we've had a lot of people ask us if we can keep friends together beyond the 1 year and beyond the grade 12s. And Director McDonald has done the numbers to do with keeping students for 2 years, keeping students for 3 years, actually for preventing that catchment change from happening to achieve what you've stated there in your comment. And I will tell you that it's my understanding, and I've looked at the calculations, but I'll certainly get Director McDonald to answer, that it just creates a great imbalance and very high numbers in one school, very low numbers in another.
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent Nixon. The other thing we are cognizant of is a scenario like that would leave us with a multi-year catchment change, which we typically would not do because it just causes too many issues for too many years.
And I just, Assistant Superintendent Riley, we always have the benefit of keeping our mics off for a moment just to discuss your question. But Assistant Superintendent Riley had a very astute comment as well. And I'd like him to share it. Thank you.
Sorry for the delay. I think it's important to remember too that we always have the transfer process available to any students who are looking to stay in a certain school. And considering there is not a large number of students coming out of Heffley Creek, and we are anticipating room at Brock with this catchment change, I think that would be a viable option for students who would like to stay at Brock from Heffley Creek.
Thank you. So there is a comment made about, would you get a bus if you got a transfer from Heffley to, sorry, if you got to go to Brock Middle School, would there be a bus? I'm probably not saying it quite accurately, but that I know you get the gist of it, and I'm going to let Director Chris Jansen share.
So based on board policy, students going to an out of catchment school, if they are able to receive a transfer to a school that they would like to attend, there would not be busing provided based on board policy.
Thank you for joining us this evening. And as we said, you feel free to submit questions online, and we will be answering them in the FAQs. And I hope you have a good evening. Thank you.